I still remember one night at Starlight, and I would go there just before they opened, and I still remember the table where I was sitting at the first time where I was able to hit, and it was late for you because I was like 5-6 o'clock Pacific time and you're in Toledo. And the first time that I was like hit a button and literally what was on that printed check showed up on my phone screen. And when that happened, I was like, oh, we're good. Like I was like just being able to see, here's this paper check that you're used to seeing whenever you're at a restaurant, you know, getting your check. And then next thing you know, that the contents of that check are rendered beautifully on your phone. To me, that was this major breakthrough because I'd never seen anything like that. And so I was on a little high after that. All right, Scott. Everything's recording now. Scott, I was really off to a good start. All right, cool. Well, Scott, I want to welcome you and welcome myself to what is probably our first official episode of Turning Tables with Up and Go.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to be here as well. Thank you for having me.
Good to be in California.
It's good for us to be here. Yes, right, Scott, because you're visiting from Toledo, Ohio. Yeah, where you very happily have lived your whole life.
Yes.
Yeah.
I went to school there and everything. You just never leave.
You never leave. It is good to be happy where you are because you meet so many people that just move from city to city.
Yeah.
I did move from San Diego a couple times, but always move back. All right. Well, yes. So this is our first podcast, Turning Tables. And I think maybe we should start talking a little bit. First of all, hopefully everyone watching knows what Up and Go is. We're a pay at table company where you can scan a QR code, pay your check, get a text to pay your check, and lots of other great features coming soon. But you and I have been started this company going on almost 10 years now, right? We're coming up on our 10th anniversary.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact date, but it was 2016.
2016, yes. It was October 2016. And why don't we try to just talk a little bit about the history and how that all got started back in 2016, right?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So do you remember the impetus? I think I probably gave you a call at some point.
Yeah, you called me. I guess it was in October. I don't remember. And you said, I got this idea. I think it's a good idea. And I was like, tell me more. So I don't know. You can fill in the details, but my memory was you had an interaction where you wanted to split a check with some friends and you realized that there wasn't a good way to do it. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Living here in downtown, I would go out with my friends a lot, and constantly you get to that worst part of the dining experience, which is where it's time to pay, right? I think everybody feels the same way, that that's probably the least fun part of going out. And so the idea was also, how do you make sure you can pay fairly? Because when it comes to dividing the check, it's never really fair. It's often never fair. And so in particular, I was out with a friend who ordered something like 4 or 5 drinks and a burger. And I think I had a drink and he wanted to split it at the end. So I thought, okay, there's got to be a better way to pay the check. And at the same time, there's got to be a better way to split the check. And so I reached out to you because you and I have worked together before, right?
Yeah.
You're a little bit about your background, right? You're a software developer.
Yeah, by trade. Yeah. Most of my development history is in web development. I've been doing web development for over 20 years. I don't know.
You went to school for software development?
Yeah, I went to the University of Toledo, computer science and engineering. And before that, I started, I think my first foray into programming, I was maybe 11.
Wow.
My dad had a Tandy 1000, if you remember what that was. And
is that the TRS? Or is that a different machine?
I think it's a different machine.
Okay.
Anyway, I saw some basic programming language in the manual, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And I started trying to fiddle with it. Not so much success at first, but a few years later, I got a basic book from the library. And, oh, that's where I went wrong. And off to the races. Eventually, I got my own computer, and I was programming from day one. So
did you pretty much know, like, throughout high school, going into college, that was exactly what you're going to do? You're going to be a software developer?
Yeah, once I got a computer, like, I never considered anything else, really.
Yeah. Sorry if I'm dating you here, but what year did you graduate college?
I graduated college in 2003, but I was actually already working full-time at a software firm before that. So my internship turned into a salaried position. And my first job as an intern, I was working on internal web tools to help the company run.
Mhm.
But they were a multimedia company. So we were working on video editing software, compositing, all sorts of fun stuff like that. I got to shoot video playing ping pong and then analyze the video for are the circles round and all sorts of fun things like this. And it was great. I loved working there. And then unfortunately they closed and the rest of my career was after that. But I did a lot of web development there, and I've done everything from PHP to .NET to JavaScript to Python, and then eventually TypeScript, which is what we work with.
Yeah. So at that time, like 2003, that was definitely before apps were a thing, right? Because iPhone didn't come out until 2007, 2008.
Yeah. It was
And probably
before the modern web, it was like what we then called Ajax, but like web pages that would interact back with you, for the most part, didn't exist back then. You type in a form, click a button, and then a new page would come up.
it's like the very beginning of making an application within a browser.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it used to just be static pages, basically.
Right.
Click, click, move to the next page.
Yeah.
And I remember that was like a really sort of sexy thing, right? Like stuff moves around in the browser and all of that.
Right.
And
I was there while that was all happening, for sure.
yeah. And so like before that, everything was more like software development for, let's say, Windows or Mac or like a desktop application. Yeah. So you were what was like the frontier at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you and I, we eventually met, right? Because we ended up working for the same company.
Yeah, we worked for a software consulting firm, and they did remote development. So I was in Toledo, Ohio. Mm-hmm. I think you were here in San Diego. I'm not even sure.
Yeah, I was here in San Diego.
And then we met like a yearly gathering.
That's true.
And we started working together on various projects, and eventually left that company and worked together since then.
Yeah, so we worked at this company called Art and Logic, run primarily by Paul Hershenson, who's like a very great guy and still a good friend. And I remember at that time, because that was that was right around 2007, 2008, 2009, when apps were a big deal. And, you know, I still remember getting my first iPhone, the iPhone 3G, and actually Art and Logic bought it for me. Nice. So that was like the very second one that was out there. And right as I was leaving business school, I remember I went to business school at Yale, and my roommate got the first iPhone. And he was so excited about it. And I was like, oh, this is just a hyped up thing. I'm not actually going to get it. I don't want to be one of those people who chases hype. So I deliberately didn't get it. But then by the time there was a new model out and, you know, I was in that business, I was like, okay, cool. I'm excited to get my iPhone. And then everything was really about being an iPhone app, an iPhone app, and an iPhone app. And then, but of course, you stuck to web development. And then the thing is, too, when you have an iPhone app, you do have a web backend, right? So you end up, you end up having to have the web component, and you end up having to have the app component. And then, you know, you need to have Android and you need to have iOS. So as that evolved, it was really a situation where if you wanted to have an app, you really had to build 3 different applications.
True. Yeah. And at a company we worked at, we had an iPhone developer and an Android developer and a web team. Mm-hmm. And it was really challenging to try to make all those apps work the same way.
Yeah, because you want to have a consistent experience for iPhone and Android, and then the web can't really be that consistent, but it has to provide like a similar level of functionality. And you almost have 4 applications, right? Because you have the web front end.
Yeah, the back end, the front end, and then the 2 phones. Yeah.
And we worked together, in fact, on a different effort before Up and Go, which was a media sharing platform called Ruvi, right? And that was like, okay, that's going to have an iPhone app, and then it's going to have an Android app. And we had 2 engineers on iPhone and 2 on Android, and 1 on the front end of web and 1 on the back end of web. And it was just like, and then you have a QA and all of this, and it's just such a big orchestration.
Yeah, it was never in sync. Like we'd release web features, and then we had to wait for the app developers to like copy it, basically.
Yeah. And I know there were platforms emerging at the time to have like write once, but for some reason I was more of a purist and I never really bought into that. And I don't know, I'm sure the industry has changed, and maybe nowadays you don't have
pros and cons.
Still pros and cons.
Yeah.
So the reason I talk about all of that is because it does come back to the beginning of Up and Go, because when I had this idea, I was like, Scott, in fact, it was originally, my idea was, let's have an app where you can pay your check split your check and pay your check at the table. And I remember calling you up and getting excited. I was like, Scott, okay, I think you can be involved. I think you can write the back end. And all we have to do is find an app developer, to make the front end. And then I was really thinking about it. And I realized, like, you know what? If you think about all the features or all the functionality that you need for this, you can basically do it in a browser, right? Because there's nothing to stop you from viewing a check. There's nothing to stop you from making a payment. So then I sort of had this light bulb go off, and I was like, hey, why don't we just make a fully web-based pay at table solution?
I don't remember that discussion, but it was around during that time frame where the web was really catching up, where JavaScript and HTML and CSS are capable of doing basically everything that an app could do.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the discussion, but I know we decided let's just make a web app. And another benefit of that I think is a key to our business is that we don't require an app download. We don't require sign up. And somebody who's familiar with it can pull out their camera, scan a QR code, and pay a check in like 20 seconds.
Yeah. And as we started going with building Up and Go, and I was, of course, started doing a little more research about the market. And I did discover that there were some companies, I don't remember the name now, but they had tried to create these pay at table apps. And they were all apps. And by this time, I was totally over the app craze. And I was like, this is basically dumb, because you have someone sitting at the table. All they want to do is pay their check. They don't want to have to download an app, A, B, register it, right? And then finally, if everything works well, be able to pay it. So the whole idea was like just to take all that friction away. And I don't recall there being a solution that was only web-based when we got started. But now, if you look at the competitive landscape, it basically seems, the first time someone does something, people, it looks all innovative, right? But then at some point, when everyone's doing it, people forget that it was like a unique idea back in the day. But I really think we were at the cutting edge of that, of just making everything in the web.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I think right from the start, I think we have a lot of similarities in our ideas about what's important. And I think the frictionless nature of that experience appeals to both of us and our ultimately our user experience in total. So we just wanted to build the best way to pay in a restaurant that would make the guests the most happy. And we see that in the same way. So that got us where we are.
Yeah. Well, we do often, we have a very interesting way of working together where we, on one hand, get along very well, but then we debate certain topics pretty intensely. And so the fact that, the core vision is something that we're both like in violent agreement with, I think is like, obviously a really good thing. And, and then I remember still, because we had the whole, okay, let's scan a QR code. And then one day I just remember thinking, you know what? I bet that Apple is just so ahead of the game. I bet if you just open up the camera, and this is like 2017 or something by this time, like I bet if you just hold the camera at a QR code, it'll probably read it, because a lot of times people were downloading QR reader apps.
Yeah.
And it worked. And I was like astounded that I just had this idea and Apple had thought of it and made it all work. And so I remember like the first few years of Up and Go, a lot of it was just training people that, hey, you can open up your camera and it'll scan a QR code. Like people didn't know that.
Yeah, I wasn't on the iPhone bandwagon early. I've always been a Google and Android guy. And when I say always, though, I was late to the party. So I actually didn't get a smartphone, I believe, until 2010. And I had the Moto Droid. And I didn't want one at all, but then I saw it and I was immediately hooked and pretty much got a new phone every year. So the phones that I had could always scan QR codes, but a lot of people couldn't back in those days.
Yeah. Now it's pretty standard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about a little bit more about actually making Up and Go happen. So I think in day one, we didn't have, what did we have, right? We didn't have a restaurant.
No,
to use it.
We just had an idea.
We didn't have a POS to integrate with, but we wanted to get going, right? Do you remember that
I think
time?
We started with designs,
yes.
if I recall. So we had already worked with a designer at Ruvi. His name's Maciej. He's actually in Poland, and he's really talented at what he does, user interface designer. So Touradj just gives him an idea or draws some sketches, and then he turns it into pixels, and it's awesome.
Yeah. So first we just made like the whole demo of like, okay, here's how you would flip through. Basically, we created like a wizard where it takes you step by step through the payment flow.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was such a classic development because to this day, of all the parts of the experience that we evolve, we never changed that.
Yeah. And a key part of that, I think that's helped us is that from the start, we had the idea that we were going to be POS agnostic. So the demo that we built is a fake point of sale system, and it at least in some part is still there today. Like the first code we wrote is still in the app.
Yeah. And I mean, we had like that demo check, right? We have, we always have this demo check where you can just walk through the whole payment experience on Up and Go, and that's been really helpful to send to people. I've had some very interesting companies contact me and say, hey, we found that on your website and our whole company used it and loved it and we've got to get it. And that's like genius, to have the demo check. And on one hand, you feel like you're kind of giving away some of your secret sauce because anyone that wants to compete with you can check it out. But they can also just go to a restaurant and use Up and Go. So I figured it was worth it. And then so what? So like we had this demo check, and then how were you, right? I mean, we just not like we quit our jobs, right?
No, I was working full time at a different job. I think, I can't recall exactly, but we might have talked about this when I was briefly unemployed. But anyway, I was working full time.
Yeah. So tell me more about how you were developing Up and Go back in 2017, back in Toledo, because you still had a job during the day. Yeah,
I was working full time for, I don't remember, some sort of finance.
Don't mention the company. They might say they own Up and Go.
I wasn't going to mention it.
Yeah, don't mention.
But like basically at night when I was just lying around, like
not using company property.
I worked from home.
Yeah.
I was
your own laptop.
Like on my laptop, laying in my bed, just plugging away, designing web pages and back end stuff, and just working through demos and pushing pixels around. We like to have really nice UX, user experience.
You're right.
And just trying to get it perfect and make it feel good. I think we used to have some animations back then. And it was fun, and just slowly pieced it together. And once I'd have something, I'd show you. You'd be like, hey, can you tweak it? Maybe we should move this over here. And we'd talk about it. And then we go, sure. We move things around and get it right. And the whole time we were a demo POS. It was just making fake payments.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that we needed to get integrated into a POS. And also that really important for me was to actually get this running in a restaurant, because previous experience, you create an idea and you don't want to just go make it in a vacuum and then try to bring it to the market, because you may not have like checked all the boxes, that the users need. So I was very eagerly trying to find a restaurant, and I had fortuitously made friends with a restaurateur here in San Diego named Matt Hoyt, who owned this wonderful restaurant called Starlight. And so I met with him a couple of times, and he's like, you know what, Touradj, this is actually great that you've reached out to me about this, because I love my restaurant and it's doing well. But the way that I see myself growing is not necessarily by creating more locations, or more restaurant concepts, but I really want to use the expertise that I have from running a restaurant to help other companies. Like one of the things he was involved in was making like a custom brand of ginger soda to use in the mules they were making. And so he said, yeah, this is great. I'd love to be involved. And so therefore we had our first restaurant, which was really exciting. But he said, you know what, Touradj, the only way that I can use this in my restaurant is if it talks to my POS. And he said, my POS is Aloha. That's the gold standard. And it's probably impossible to integrate with them. But if you can, we can give it a try. Do you remember all of that? I'm sure I told you all about that.
Yeah. Let me take a step back, though, because I remember you calling me a lot of times. And you're like, oh, I'm running around and going into restaurants and asking them what POS they use and asking them if they're interested in our product.
Yeah.
And then eventually you found Matt and Starlight. But after that, you were like hounding Aloha.
I wasn't hounding. I was trying to find the right person to talk to.
Well, you were calling everybody.
At a very big company,
They somehow your persistence paid off, and they were like, sure, you can integrate. And we got an Aloha connection, and we work with them through their cloud API. So
Yeah.
I started programming the POS integration,
Mm-hmm.
and we got ourselves installed in Starlight and just basically testing in a live location. It was really like an alpha version. So we were working through the issues we'd find in a real location,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd make changes as quickly as we could, and then just test it again. So it was really slow going at the start, and we'd have a handful of payments and then change some things and have a handful of payments.
Well, yeah, even before that, I remember just like trying to get everything set up at Starlight because I got these instructions from, NCR, and it was like how to configure the Aloha side of things. And so you have this beautiful, and this is one thing I've since learned by visiting restaurants is when you go into the dining area of the restaurant, oftentimes everything is beautiful and it's, themed, and all the money goes into making that space look really nice. And then you ask, well, where's the back of house? And they go, follow me into this little closet. And you go in the back room, and it looks like it's everything is disheveled, and the cheapest chairs and the cheapest everything. And so because it's the back of the house, right? And so anyway, back in there and tried to follow all these settings, and Aloha just has a million settings, right? And I was so nervous as I went through it with Matt. I'm just so nervous because I was like, there's all these check boxes, and his whole business runs on this thing. And
Yeah.
what if I click the wrong box or change the wrong thing? So I was like so sure, to have him sitting there next to me, clicking these boxes, and then whatever other settings there were. And then it was really it was really like a stage thing, right? Because I think our first goal was, hey, can we just read the check, right? Can we just,
for sure.
Yeah. So I still remember one night at Starlight, and, I used to go there. It was usually like a Wednesday, and I would go there just before they opened. And I still remember the table where I was sitting at the first time where, I was able to hit, and it was late for you because I was like 5-6 o'clock Pacific time and you're in Toledo. And the first time that I was like hit a button, and literally what was on that printed check showed up on my phone screen. And when that happened, I was like, oh, we're good. Like I was like, just that. It was such a crazy thing at that time, if you rewind to whatever that was, 2016, 2017, just being able to see, here's this paper check that you're used to seeing whenever you're at a restaurant, getting your check. And then next thing you know, that the contents of that check are rendered beautifully on your phone. To me, that was just major breakthrough because I'd never seen anything like that. And so I was on a little high after that. And then, of course, obviously, you got to get to the next challenge, which was paying. And, eventually we got that to work. And the nice thing was, we were always very interested in, and we never were like, oh, we gotta be the processor, or we've got to be this, or we've got to be that. We always had this idea of we want to, as seamlessly as possible, just blend into what the restaurant is already using. And NCR had these super great APIs where you just send it the card details and it would process it. And it's beautiful because, if you're the restaurant owner, inside the POS, you've got your payment is there. You can refund it if you want. And we still, in all the cases where that's possible, and nowadays on even new POSs, like where we can back to being able to do that with like Toast and everything, as much as possible, keep the processing, where the restaurant wants it to be. But anyway, so we got the actual payment to work, and then it was very exciting.
Yeah, I think it was exciting for me too, but I think because when you're building software, the fun thing is that you're making things and watching it change, and it's like you see the results of your work immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So the fun thing back then for me is we're on the phone and you're twiddling in Aloha settings, and I'm sitting at my computer and it's attached to it. I'm like, oh, this looks funny. Can you do this over here and let me see what the result is? And, you'd change something, and then I'd look at the API and go, oh, I can work with that. And I'd write 2 lines of code, and then the check would update, and we'd keep doing it until we got it all right. So we were looking at discounts and things like this. And then ultimately the same process with the payments. And we got a payment to go through. And it's just exciting because now we have a product that actually works.
Yeah. Actually, one number comes to mind when you talk about this part of the story, and I know you know what this number is. 30023.
That was like, I think that was our first printed check that we ultimately turned into the demo check. So our demo check to this day is 30023.
Yeah, it's got to become like our license plate someday or something like that. But yeah, I remember Matt was like, all right, guys, we got to make this complicated. So he rang up this check. One thing had a discount. Another thing had some kind of modifier that was expensive. One thing he put like a discount on it, check level discount, item level discount, all these things, tried to have this most complicated check. And it just, for whatever reason, was 30023. And which in Aloha speak means the 23rd check on terminal 3 of the day.
Right.
So it's, if you don't know that, the first digit on Aloha, or possibly 2 digits if it's a long number, is your terminal number. And every day it starts. So I guess he must have had some customers already that day, right? Because I don't think we did 23 test checks.
No, not at all. We would just change one check over and over again.
Yeah. So, and then what do you remember from there? Like, so we got it all running, and then
I think that's when we built out like the split check feature, which was always the goal. Like that was our dream. But
it was pay in full at first, right?
Yeah,
that was like the goal, is to go like really one step at a time.
Yeah, I think that's something we've done well over our history. Is we have a very iterative approach, and it's just like, what's the reasonably engineered, but the fastest way we can get this in. And we built the software to be very modular and refactorable. So especially in the early years when it was just me, we could make changes very quickly. And I remember one time, maybe it was 2018 or 2019, we now had some restaurants, not just Starlight. And when we moved into new restaurants, it turns out that they used their POS systems differently. It was still Aloha, but we suddenly had new things that we'd never seen before. And even I was in Washington, D.C. on vacation, and the same process. We pull down the API data, look at it, and go, oh, that's interesting. I can fix that. And I think within a few days, our system now supported that restaurant too. And eventually that went away, but it was really fun to just find new things as we go. It still happens sometimes, but less often now, of course. Yeah,
and I think that's you reminded me of that. That's one of the things that makes this kind of software really complicated, because I think on the surface, a lot of people see like, oh, what is this? It's a list of things you have to pay for, and you pay for it, great. But the way that the data comes down from the POS is just so customizable by the restaurant.
Yeah.
And, one of the examples that is in my mind is, I remember one restaurant says, like if you order a Coke, it says, Coke, $2, or I guess $5 now. And then there was another restaurant where you see soda $0, upcharge Coke $5. And so just the way that people, store their data, and then you start to see that, okay, there's tax rates, and tax could be inclusive or exclusive. And, I think in some cases there could even be more than one tax. And
for sure,
it's just this like unraveling of the onion as you go from one, like the same POS, as you go from restaurant 1 to 3, the data that comes down is differently.
Yeah. And then, that's certainly true. And then you jump to other POSs and it's even more complicated. Mm-hmm. I remember one restaurant that was selling seafood by weight.
Oh yeah, that's right. And that was on Micros. That was POS number 2.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, so everything is based on like quantity, and then all of a sudden you see like 0.45 pounds of salmon. You're like, well, what? And then we have to accommodate that.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. Time went on. We kept adding features. I think you had some really innovative ways. So we were able to add like innovative ideas, I should say. And we added Apple Pay to our product, but we were able to make it work where it was still sending payments to the restaurant, and they didn't have to treat it any differently.
Yeah.
And
people love that.
I think, giving the guest more payment options and easier payment options, but the restaurant still having it as easy as we can make it, again, was just a big win, because user experience on both ends is what we've focused on.
And yeah, easy for the restaurant, easy for the server, easy for the guests. It's like a three-way experience that you got to take care of. And Apple Pay was huge, especially at that time, because there was really no way. There was really no way to get an Apple Pay payment to a restaurant, right? Because people are sitting down, they're away from the terminal. And so this idea that someone could now use their phone and do an Apple Pay payment was huge. And there were a lot of restaurants that signed up just because that was like how they could get Apple Pay. But I want to back up a little bit to the whole split the check idea, because I think you just sort of breezed right past it like it was no big deal. But, my recollection is that, making split the check work was even more, was like an order of magnitude more complicated than the entire product we had built up until that point.
For sure. And it wasn't just me. And I think I built the first version of that, but over time we had more edge cases and more trouble we had to deal with. And it's really quite complex.
Why?
When you get, you have to, like, let's say you split a check in half. Like, one of our features is you can pay one half of a check. Well, some checks end with an odd number and you can't split it in half. You got to make decisions about what to do. Mm-hmm. And even that's just a simple case. But nowadays, the really hard, the challenge that
I think I remember yelling at you, Scott, like, okay, just make the first person pay the extra penny.
Right.
Pay the first person. You're like, who's the first person? I'm like, the first person is the person who hit the button first. You're like, well, on the receiving end, sometimes the first thing that arrives is the second guy who pushed the button. So you don't know who the first person is.
That's what I was going to say. That the really hard part is the asynchronous nature of it, where like
race condition.
Two people are paying at the same time.
Yeah.
Who's first? How do you protect the second person, whoever that may be, from not paying part of the check that the first person was paying? Mm-hmm. So you have to like keep track of who's trying to pay certain amounts, and it's pretty complicated.
At one point I was like, round down for everybody, and the restaurant doesn't mind if they don't get that last penny. But obviously that wasn't going to be good. Yeah, that was a long time ago. And not only that, but I think one of the reasons that this gets complicated is because you have all these sort of human components, not just the two. No, beyond having two or more people trying to pay their check. Now you have the server. Like, I remember one time we had this issue where someone was like, something went wrong. It's like, what goes wrong? Well, the guy was trying to pay with Up and Go, but then they also gave their card to the server. And so the server goes to pay. And while they were waiting, they decided to pay on their phone. And so, a lot of times with the POS, when the check is in use, because the server now has it open, right? We got the payment from the person, but guess what? You can't overpay a check. And so even just the customers can be like their own worst enemies in a sense,
For sure. Yeah, there's just, even to this day, we still work through cases like that, trying to just perfect the flows to make sure that checks aren't underpaid or overpaid and split correctly, and what happens when this goes wrong, and what happens when this goes wrong in the restaurant, etc.
Yeah, it's never ending. In fact, it was, even after all these years, about a year ago, we had a restaurant sign up and everything's working fine. And they're like, hey, I don't see the lunch special on there listed on the check. It turns out that was programmed in as a promo, or like a combo.
It's a combo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we realized that this particular POS, gives you all the data, like, here's what's on the check. But if a combo is on there, it's not there. The data is in like a totally different spot. So then we had to go all the way back and say like, okay, and then when we uncovered that, we're like, oh my gosh, there's like 5 different types of things here. It's not just combos. So it's right.
It was the same thing I talked about earlier with, like different restaurants having different setups, but it somehow for years, nobody used the combo feature in Aloha.
Well, yeah, we never had a restaurant that had like a combo
I should say
feature,
none of our customers.
Yeah. So, well, all right. Those were all the fun beginning days. And then I think eventually, 2020 rolled around, and
that was the big moment.
Yeah. So how did the company change around that time?
Obviously, we all remember COVID-19 happened, and everybody's at home, and restaurants suddenly had a strong desire for contactless payments and ways to pay without handing credit cards to servers.
Right.
And so I think maybe we had 100 restaurants at that time, and then all of a sudden the phone was off the hook.
Yeah. I was accused of starting a pandemic to as a growth opportunity for the company.
So
more than
we
once.
hired some support staff, and we're signing up customers left and right, and the system starts scaling. We got one of our very big clients then.
Yes.
You want to say? I don't know. And then
Oh, well, we'll talk about that later.
sure. Anyway, 2020 in June was my birthday, and I was going out to eat, and all of a sudden I get a call, and it's like, hey, the system's down because there's too much traffic. And I was like, that's not good, but I think we built it to scale, so maybe we can just turn on 8 computers instead of 1 and see what happens. And we had a little more discussion. It was slightly more complicated than that, but it worked like a charm. So turns out we were prepared, and now we had more payments coming through, and just more and more all the time since then.
Let's talk a little bit more about that part. So, when you start and you just want to get some application that's running, right? And one day, okay, hopefully it goes through the roof and you're going to need all this capacity. Like, you as a software engineer, what was going through your mind as you designed, even where you're going to host this and how you're going to set up like the infrastructure, for the nerds out there? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, thankfully I had some experience with this in the past, but the few main ideas, one, we host on AWS, and you host in the cloud, and it gives you a lot of freedom to make changes pretty quickly. And our app is containerized, right? So we use Docker containers or similar technology. And the other thing you do is everything has to be stateless, or at least mostly stateless. So if we have the web talking to one API, and now you have 2 APIs because you need 2 to handle the traffic, they can't depend on each other. Any one person making a payment has to be like independent from everything that happened before that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically the gist of it. So we were just able to, instead of having 1 API container, we just turned on 8.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we had to turn on a couple more client containers too to work something out, but it worked.
Yeah, it did work. And now it auto scales, I think. Some amount of auto scale, some amount of predictive activity.
Yeah, we have different scaling on different days of the week.
Mm-hmm.
And we're constantly working on improving that infrastructure to make it easier to scale up and down.
One of the things I find so interesting when I look at the payment volume of a restaurant is if you look year over year, how regular certain days are. So, for example, when I look at a year of up and go traffic, the biggest spike is always Mother's Day. Mother's Day is the busiest day.
I don't know which holidays are the highest. I know that's true. I know Valentine's Day is going to be big coming up soon.
Valentine's is big. But Father's Day is big too. Not as big as Mother's Day.
Not as big as Mother's Day.
Mother's Day, Father's Day. And then the 2 days where traffic dies.
Christmas.
And Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah. There's like no traffic on those days.
So especially Christmas. Like, I think there's possibly 0 payments on Christmas.
I think we'll have to go check, but I like to believe there's no 0 payment days.
I could be wrong.
Yeah. But it's definitely interesting. Every year you look, you'll see, at least from what I remember, you see Mother's Day very high, and then Father's Day a little lower, which is kind of interesting, right? Because I get Mother's Day because you don't want your mother to cook, but Father's Day feels like the father would enjoy barbecuing. I don't know.
You might be right.
I just got my first barbecue, but I'm also not a father, but I gotta say I like barbecuing. And then Christmas and Thanksgiving. A lot of times when you talk to restaurants, they say like, "Oh, those are the only days that our staff get off."
Yeah, restaurant people work harder than the rest of us.
Yeah, that's true. And that's something too, like running this company, you realize, because we're in technology, right? So you don't really think you're just in a technology business, but when you're catering to restaurant, to hospitality, their hours end up becoming your hours, right?
Right.
And that can be challenging because everybody wants to, when it's time to go out and eat, everybody wants to go out and eat, right? They don't want to like sit behind their computer and be ready for something that needs attention. Same thing on weekends and holidays.
Yeah.
Like Mother's Day, you want to be out on Mother's Day. You don't want to be watching over a computer system. So, yeah. Well, as the company has grown and we've taken on all these other brands and, really built the team, how do you feel just looking back? Did you envision that we would have come this far all the way back then in 2016, 17?
I mean, not at all. I think, we were talking about scaling and whatnot, but I'm sitting here thinking now about how, we went from demo payments to maybe a handful of payments a week to tens and then suddenly thousands. And now what are we doing? Over 1 million payments a month. It's somewhat staggering to think about.
Yeah. I mean, there are days where you just look at the volume and it's like, this is like two sports stadiums full of, like, I was watching the Super Bowl, right, Scott? So you were talking about hitting 1 million payments a month. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's just wild to see.
Over 1 million, I should say. Yeah. And getting closer and closer to doing $1 billion a year in payments, which I think will pass this coming year.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, well, I look at the numbers. So, all right, cool. Well, I know we've been talking for a little while here. So maybe I'll just ask you a couple more things. Let's talk AI. Do you think that I can hire AI instead of you and save money for the company?
I would say yes, but give it a few years.
Give it a few years.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a big AI proponent. I think we're in an interesting spot right now where it's like it's a lot of hype, but I believe in the long-term hype. So I was actually using AI to do some programming today. Unfortunately, in my position now, I spend a lot of time working on, managing tasks and reviewing code and managing the team, but I still like to get my hands in there and do work when I can. So I was working with a AI coding agent and building a
new integration. Yeah.
It was fun. So it's not perfect, but it feels like you can get a lot more done very quickly if you got to know how to use it. So it's a new skill that we all have to learn.
Well, I kind of was looking over your shoulder earlier when you were working on that, and it looked like it was writing all this code. And I mean, isn't that sort of like you have a certain way that you like to write code? And I know that you've imbued that upon the other developers and the other engineers on our team. And altogether, you coalesce into a way you like to write software. And then AI comes in one day and gets this assignment from you. And does it just run off and write code in like a totally different way that it wants to write code?
A little bit, but I think in the earlier days that was true. But like it's really in your code base, and it's like understanding what you're building, and so it can build new additions in the way that you build it.
So you have to start by like, you basically give it your code?
Yeah, it's in the code base and it's analyzing it. And when you ask it to do something, it's looking for context and trying to figure out what you mean and how your app works and how to plug it in. So this feature I was working on covers payments and events and control panel pages. So it's like all encompassing, and it needs to understand all those pieces to put this puzzle together. And it makes some mistakes, but it's actually fairly decent at correcting them when you just say, hey, you messed up, fix this. So it's pretty incredible what it can do right now. And I think it's just getting better all the time.
But I mean, given the amount of time you have to work with it to correct this, correct that, whatever, at the end of the day, do you feel like, did it really save you time? Will it have saved you time?
I think there's a lot of opinions and the vote's still out on that, but I do think it'll save time because it's almost like having a junior intern where you can give it guidance and it's going to go off and do stuff. And you gotta check it very carefully. But in general, it's going to take less time to check somebody else's work than it is to design it yourself and do it from scratch. And
is that really playing out? Like, do you feel when this particular endeavor is over with, you will have spent less time?
I think that's probably true. I was actually doing this while involved in some meetings. They were actually doing an audit here. So I was involved with an audit and listening in. And when I'd have time, I'd turn to my computer and essentially give my junior intern some work to do and then look away and go back to the meeting. So I think it's an accelerator. I don't think we're at the point yet where it can replace our jobs. It can replace our engineers, but it can certainly make engineers get more work done more quickly.
I once heard an engineer, someone that, we're both friends with, say, I think the comment came up on Slack, like, other companies are using AI for their development, so we better do it too, and otherwise we'll be at a competitive disadvantage. This is Andrew, right? And Andrew's comment was, no, someone said that, and Andrew was like, well, I sure hope other companies are using AI because that puts us at a competitive advantage. And I would like, that really resonated with me, I think there's some truth to that.
I think that we have an attention to detail that a lot of people don't have. And again, I think the main skill to learn with using AI is that you become the code reviewer. Like, you can't trust what it did. You have to check all its work and tweak things to make it better. But
especially the type of work we do. I mean, we're like, the software we create is like very precise, and it has to enable all these disparate systems to communicate: POSs, payment gateways, fraud systems, loyalty systems, all of these things. And it's just so precise, it's not like you're building a game, right? Or you're building a CMS or something like that, where you could just imagine how the application evolves in this incremental way. Everything we do is sort of like couture, and unique to each individual thing that we're trying to get going. So to me, it feels, almost like it will be more work to get the AI.
Well, we'll see. But I think AI is better when it has more contextual information about a given task. Mm-hmm. So the integration I was working on today is with a well-known public system that's well documented, and it's going to do that better than like some of the stuff you're talking about. Like, some of those POS integrations are really esoteric and you got to figure them out as you go. I think it's not going to do a good job at that because it just doesn't know what to do.
Right.
But
some of these more common things.
Yeah, it knows how to do the integration. there's OAuth is something that's involved here, and it just writes the code for you.
Yeah.
And it also understands our code base for the most part. So so far, it's made some rather interesting user interface decisions that we're certainly going to have to either ask it to fix or fix ourselves. But it did build like a working user interface that's calling APIs, which are in turn calling out to integrations. And it's pretty incredible how far we've come in a few years. So at the end of the day, I don't know the answer to your question. I believe it will make this particular task easier and overall all of our tasks easier. But still a little hit or miss, and we're still learning as we go.
Yeah, I could see with back-end work, it might be better, right? Because it doesn't have to do the UI. But when it comes to the UI, it reminds me of the days not very long ago where you would ask AI for a picture and you'd end up with someone that has like, five index fingers or 3 thumbs or like a toe on their ear or something like that, right?
I think the more specific instructions you give it, it's actually pretty good at that stuff.
The UI.
And I've also heard that different AI engines are better than others at those tasks.
Right.
So the tool that I use lets me switch AI APIs, and I might do so to work on that. But I didn't give it very much information. It said, hey, I need this page to manage this data. And it made something that works. So it's still pretty cool, even though it looks...
And just to be clear, this is not a page that shows up for people paying at the table. This is back-end management.
This is in our control panel, and it's not up to my standards. It'll look better before it's done.
I'm sure it will. I know you didn't even want to let me see it. But also, like, when you take your code base, you said like the AI needs to know you familiarize it with, you said it's in your code, so it's seeing your code. What are the risks there? Because obviously when you write code, that's this very proprietary thing that you hold really close to your chest. Like, you don't go up to Microsoft and get their, source code for Windows or anything like that. So how can you trust the AI to be, as you said, in your code?
Well, maybe I'm naive. I'm a fairly trustworthy person. These agents are designed to do what they do. And I think they're using the context of what they learned during their training, but not really actively going out and learning new things necessarily. And so when they're reading our code, I'm just assuming that what has been told to me is true, that they're not turning around and giving our code to other people. But at the end of the day, I think the magic is in the puzzle, really. And like, unless somebody else is trying to build exactly what we've built.
People are. People are.
Well, yeah, sure. But the techniques are rather well known. So I think that any little piece of our code is not going to give somebody some.
Well,
magic.
I think you're kind of talking about two different things here. One is like, is your code kept private? And two, you're talking
The
about
secret sauce or whatever.
if it does get let out, is it a problem? But
Right.
which one is it? Like I wouldn't want it to get let out, even if it's theoretically
Right.
something someone else could build as well. But it's more about like, I want it to keep it private, right? Like, would you trust AI to go balance your bank account?
Well, I probably would, but I know, again, opinions may vary. So everybody's doing this right now. And
I assume it says we're not sharing your code with other people.
If we find out that's not the case, I think there's going to be millions of angry developers. So we'll see.
Yeah. And then I know if I rewind the clock a year, because I'm skeptical about these kind of things, we were talking the other night how you asked me if I bought an NFT, and I was like, hell no, I never bought an NFT.
We were joking. But
yeah. But so in AI, I really felt like, okay, I think, the world made a big incremental step forward. But then it's not, the singularity, right? It's like, if you go back to the 50s,
Sure.
Everyone thought in the year 2000 we would be driving cars in the sky, like the Jetsons, and that didn't really happen, but we were still making a lot of advancements in technology at that time. And so anyway, a year or two ago, I was like really skeptical, with AI. But I think I realized there's a lot, like I find ways that I find it helpful, particularly just basically doing research for me. I'll ask it questions. In particular, when you don't agree with me, I try to use AI to argue with you, as you know. And that's when you tell me, stay away from AI.
Yeah,
right?
I don't always trust the things that AI says, but when AI writes code, I can read it and check it myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference. And it's funny, we've kind of gone in opposite directions. When this stuff first came on the scene, ChatGPT 4 or whatever, you were a big skeptic and I was a big proponent. I was like, the singularity's coming, and I still believe that, but the realities have set in, and like, it's not coming tomorrow. And it's the hype is, these things do a lot of amazing things, but they don't do what the people building them claim they do necessarily. So we're kind of meeting in the middle, and I don't know who's a bigger AI proponent now, but you got to at least explore it. I mean, we jumped on the bandwagon a little bit, and I started using it right away and wasn't that impressed, and sort of stopped using it for a while. But after a couple of years, the advancements have made me change my mind. I think it's a very valuable tool right now for developers in particular.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly open-minded to it. I know you came to me before and asked, hey, we need to pay this much money so all the devs have access to these AI tools. And I didn't hesitate. I said, sure, the last thing we want to do is be like a curmudgeon, but at the same time, you want to go into it with like a healthy amount of skepticism.
Sure.
I mean, if we can have all the talented engineering staff that we have, and they can use AI as a multiplier, and get twice as much work done or 3 times as much work done, like that's very exciting.
Yeah, even if they can get 10% more work done, it's exciting. So yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah, maybe that'll be the net minus the looking over the shoulder of your intern, so to speak.
We'll see.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I know we spent a lot of time talking here, so maybe one last thing. Where do you see all of this going? Up and go, not
Up
AI.
and go? Yeah. Well, I was actually going to ask you that.
Oh, you were going to ask me?
Where do you see up and go going?
Yeah. I see it going up. Yeah, well, I think, obviously Up and Go started out very much with this idea, very guest-centered idea of making it easier to pay and easier to split the check. And really, the bigger picture that I see now, while all of that is really true, it's just recognizing that moment that you can put a new piece of digital interaction in front of the guest opens up a lot more doors than just payment. There's a lot around just getting to know who your guests are. There's a lot of investment in that now, understanding, okay, this is Scott. This is what he comes in and likes to buy. This is Scott's email address, Let's keep track of Scott. Let's follow him home. No, I'll follow you home. But just to get to know your guests better, giving people tools to market to their guests, I think handhelds have obviously taken off, and we have a handheld now with some partners. But also, I still think just paying on when you're a restaurant and you get someone to load your check on their phone, you've got your brand on their phone. You could then do things like have them, leave you a review or sign up for loyalty. Things like this become very easy because lots of things autofill. Lots of things are already on their phone. Whereas, that's very difficult to do when you're handing someone a device, right? Like it's a little harder for someone to sign up for loyalty. They obviously can't go leave you a review. We have a feature in Up and Go where people can upload a picture of their meal, right? You can't do that from like a handheld device that someone drops off, even though, again, we now have an Android device with our partners. So, I think it's really just turning into this system that's much bigger than payments, but payments is the way in, and really about the whole life cycle of the consumer. Can we get their feedback on the food? Can we learn about them? If they had a bad time, can we, can the restaurant get back to them? Can we communicate with them once they're gone? Can we get them back in? Can we get to know them? Can things be personalized? We're trying to introduce ordering as well, but want to do it in a really novel way because I know during COVID, there was the whole excitement about paying with the QR code contactless payments, but then everyone was like, oh, we don't need servers. People are just going to order at the table. And I just kind of kept us on the sidelines because I'm like, that's not going to work. People love the ability to just take control of the check at the end of the meal and pay. I mean, their payment methods are on their phone anyway, but they still like to interact with servers, to order. Like they want to put their phone away. We know how much people hate QR code menus, and I hate QR code menus. We never did QR code menus. I hate QR code menus. But, is there a way to bring a way for someone, you'll see we'll be coming out with some products, but just bring ordering into the equation in a way that's different in a kind of a small way, but a way that's really impactful. So, there's just really what we've done with payments is I see it turning into a big suite of products. They can really manage that part of your technology as a restaurant that interacts with the guests.
But payments is the center. Payments is still the entry point.
Payments is the center. Payments is the entry point.
Yeah.
There might even be a day where the payment happens automatically, right? But we're part of it. So
sounds like fun.
Sounds like fun. Yeah.
Cool.
All right, Scott. Well, this has been a long conversation. Our camera overheated twice and we had to restart. So if you saw any abrupt stops and restarts, you know why. And first official long form podcast here, Turning Tables with Up and Go. So it was fun, Scott. Thanks. Hopefully we have another 10 years and see where we are.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be in the office today.
Thanks for coming all the way from Toledo. All right.
See you later.
See you later.